Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 37 of Superannuated Starman. It's October. It's getting colder. The leaves are changing. People are putting out their autumn decorations and getting ready for Halloween. That means we had no other choice. We had to cover a game that involves cemeteries, zombies, gargoyles, and so much more. So, of course, we're covering MediEvil for the original PlayStation.
For you at home, it's MediEvil. It's not Medieval Total War, just so you know.
That's a good point, and I always struggle with the name of this game because it's spelled Medieval, all one word. I've heard it so many ways because I've watched a lot of interviews about this game recently. So, who are we? I'm Sean Ryan, I'm your host, and I'm joined, as always, by Chris Duerksen.
Always. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man, and with me, you already heard his voice, is Cory Braucks.
I'm actually a figment of your psychosis.
I would not be surprised at this point because I'm not all there. I'm not all there, and I haven't been for years. Guys, I hope that this time of year is treating you well. It's almost November at this point.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I made a conscious effort to be the cool house this year for Halloween, so I'm really excited.
Good for you.
Yeah, I got full-size candy bars. Come at it.
Oh man,
nice.
That's
we don't
pricey.
get trick-or-treaters. But one addition to our house, we got the floating candles to make it look like Hogwarts. That's my big excitement for the month.
Your full-size candy bars, man? Like, how expensive is that? How many trick-or-treaters do you get?
We get like a good 60 on average. Like, there's a lot of kids in the neighborhood, but it wasn't that bad because Walmart had these like 18 packs that were on sale for like $15 a piece, so it's like less than $1 a bar. I'm like, you get a candy bar, you get a candy bar.
That's awesome, man. So for those of you out there, this time of year gets incredibly busy for all of us. I'm buried under school and other work obligations, so this might be the only episode that we put out for this month-ish. It's definitely going to be that way. This time of year is so busy for all of us. We are just buried under work and all these other things. So I hope that we can get this out before Halloween. I don't know. I'm going to do my best. But let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to discuss the history of MediEvil. MediEvil is an action-adventure hack-and-slash developed by the Sony Computer Entertainment Studio Cambridge, a British video game development studio formerly known as Gorilla Cambridge. The game was, of course, published by Sony. Originally released on the Sony PlayStation in October of 1998 in both Europe and North America. MediEvil started its life as an arcade-style shooter under the name Dead Man Dan. As development for the title progressed, designer and writer Jason Wilson pushed the title away from being a shooter and more towards a Zelda-like game. Wanting to possess a unique lead character, Chris Sorrell, alongside Martin Pond, came up with their protagonist, Sir Daniel Fortescue, and his unfortunate backstory. As I said before, SCE Cambridge were formerly an independent studio. However, within months of Sony's agreement to publish the title, they acquired the studio, which significantly eased financial strain on the project and provided them with experience in making 3D games. Described as a, quote, huge learning project, the Cambridge team had played beta versions of Super Mario 64 and Crash Bandicoot, which helped them better understand how to build a 3D action game. Upon its release, MediEvil received mostly positive reviews from critics. However, some reviewers were unimpressed with the game's sloppy controls and disjointed level design. Even with those feelings, the game sold well enough to get a re-release as a PlayStation Platinum title in 1999. And for reference, to become a PlayStation Platinum title, you have to sell a minimum of 400,000 units. It's surprising to me that the game wasn't more popular because this title was on 11 different demo discs throughout various releases and regions. But despite mediocre sales, the game's cult classic status ensured a sequel, MediEvil 2, which released in April and May in 2000 in Europe and North America respectively.
On what system?
The original PlayStation.
Okay.
It was a direct sequel on the same system. MediEvil 1 was released in Japan in June of 1999, but didn't see much success because the Japanese audience found the idea of a skeleton being the protagonist strange, and they were fearful that they would consider a skeleton to be some sort of evil spirit. So Sir Daniel was given a helmet to be placed upon his head, largely obscuring his face. In 2005, the game received a re-release and a remake on the PSP known as MediEvil Resurrection. This was a reimagining of the first game, and 20 years after its first debut, a full remake was developed by Other Ocean, releasing in 2019. And the original 1998 game can be unlocked by completing a series of optional tasks. Those optional tasks are lost souls that are objectives that have been incorporated into the game, which require Sir Dan to complete missions after finding a ghost in each level. Once all those objectives are completed, the game unlocks an option for the, quote, old game on the main menu. This game follows the life and death of Sir Daniel Fortescue, a hero of legend that was killed by the evil wizard Zarok before succumbing to his wounds. However, like most legends, there's more to the story. In reality, Dan was struck down in the first volley of arrows fired in battle, one of which plunged into his left eye. The king, deciding to create a champion out of his untimely death, declared him the hero of Galamir and provided him a hero's resting place. Sensing defeat, Zarok retreated from battle and went into hiding, only to reappear 100 years later, casting a spell over Galamir and plunging the kingdom into eternal night and awakening his army of the undead. As an unintended consequence of his magic, Dan is awoken from his eternal slumber and is provided an opportunity to defeat Zarok, save the kingdom, and earn his place in the Hall of Heroes. So like I mentioned to you guys off air, that's all I've got for the history. I do have a little bit of trivia bits if you feel that we have enough time in this section.
Lay it on me, Skip.
Hang on. I think it would be a good place to tack on the fact, like if you talked about Dan's history and stuff, should we go ahead and mention the fact that he was actually just a big old coward and was hiding in the back and got nailed by a rando arrow? And
well, he was in the front line because you can see it in the what's it called, the intro cutscene and everything.
Oh, okay. I thought your little consciousness, your little Jiminy Cricket guy was saying that you were in the back or something like that. But yeah, so he was actually a big old hero or big old coward.
He was definitely a coward. So you played Resurrection that came out on the PSP in 2005, and that has a slightly different story than the original game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. But when Talk of MediEvil 3 failed, a comic was developed that was titled MediEvil Fate's Arrow. It was digitally released in 2019 alongside the remake that came out on PlayStation 4 at the time. This was created by the same two that developed the original game, Chris Sorrell and Jason Wilson. So it was originally a digital release, but I bought a hardback title of that, and I've got it right over here on the desk. And it kind of gives a backstory to the actual Sir Daniel. He was chosen by Xerox because Xerox was the king's first advisor, and he knew that Sir Daniel was just a loser, a coward. But yeah, he was a doofus, but they made him the captain of the guard. But Xerox knew that by putting him in charge, he would have an easier time taking over the kingdom because the soldiers were not prepared. They were not doing their drills.
Okay.
They were not training and all that.
Because they were under the lead of a slacker?
Yes.
Gotcha.
So
they purposely appointed him to a head position, or Xerox did, just to watch them fail.
Yes.
Okay.
But in the comic, Sir Daniel has gone back in time as a skeleton. He's back in Gallowmere, but he's dead. And he runs into his former self. I read it a few weeks ago, so I may not be completely on par here, but he basically has to coax his living self into being enough of a hero to be in that first charge, that first volley, knowing that he's going to die. Because if he doesn't die, he's never resurrected. If he's never resurrected, he never saves the kingdom. And if
that's deep.
Absurd.
So it creates this weird, like, repetition where Sir Daniel has to die. He has to be resurrected. He has to go through the events of MediEvil 2, where he's resurrected again, then go back in time to tell his former self, hey, you got to be a part of this charge, to start the events all over again.
Now, does he tell him, by the way, you're going to die? This is how we die? Or did he just say, hey, you got this?
I don't remember exactly. I've got it over here, so I might check it out during a break or something like that. But it's such a weird thing to write. But speaking of,
cool.
It is kind of cool. But speaking of Xerox, there was a Finnish metal band that wrote and performed a song done in first person as if it was sung by the evil wizard himself, where he sings about taking over the kingdom and exacting his revenge on Sir Dan. It's really weird. I'll put a link to it after we publish this episode. And did either of you ever have a PlayStation Vita?
No, I didn't. I mean, I had a friend that had one, but I never had one myself.
I can't remember. Is that the
kind of PSP 2? It was the better version of PSP that came along afterwards.
No, never had one.
So in 2012, on the PlayStation 3 and the Vita, there was a game called the PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale.
Right. I do remember that game. And wasn't that basically like PlayStation's version of Smash Brothers?
Exactly. So Sir Daniel, in the intro cutscene, he attacks Nathan Drake, and after he gets done attacking him, Fat Princess from the game, Fat Princess, shows up, and because he's a knight and he behaves exactly as a knight should, he goes and bows his head before her as taking a knee. And I just love that little interchange. It's such a neat little nod to his character, because now we know through that comic that Sir Daniel was just like Cory put, just a doofus, but he has earned his place as a hero of legend. And the last little bit that I have, I mentioned in the Japanese version of the game that Sir Dan has a helmet on. Well, you can get access to that helmet as DLC in the 2019 remake for PS4 and on PS5. It doesn't cost you anything, but there is a small catch. But it's a very small one. You have to download, or I think you can just add it to your library if you have PSN, the MediEvil short-lived demo. Once you download that demo, or I think I just added it to my library, I don't think I downloaded it, you can then download that helmet and you can wear it in game if you want. It does nothing. It's completely cosmetic, changes the game in absolutely no way. But I think it's a really neat way that they kind of reference the Japanese game itself.
I don't know why they would want to. I get the hesitation to have a skeleton because of whatever, like, cultural bias, but Sir Dan has such a doofy face that I don't know why you would want to hide that. Like, it's the most like
It's
charming
the
part
only
of the character. Yeah.
It's his only expressionable part. He doesn't talk. He
Yeah.
mumbles because he doesn't have a lower jaw.
So there's actually a little neat bit about that. So Jason Wilson, one of the creators, he recorded all of his lines, gritting his teeth and wearing a bucket over his head. That's why
That's
he
great.
sounds like that. Yeah, it's just a neat little, like,
How they did it.
Yeah, a little behind the scenes. So, guys, that's all I have for the history and my little bit of trivia. Do you guys have anything you want to add before we move on?
Nope.
All right, then. All good. So we're going to take another break. And when we come back, we're going to come to our history and discuss what it was like playing MediEvil back in the day.
And we're back. So, childhood memories. I definitely had a copy of this as a kid, and one of the things that I remember the most is the weird box art. It's very much like a weird, like, creepy painting, and the background is like this exploding, like, lightning storm of a graveyard type of deal. And Sir Dan is just hanging out on the cover, and it's just this big skeleton dude, and he's armored up, and he's got like this creepy arm on, and he's got like this half a head, and
he looks completely brutal.
yeah, and well, the thing is that he looks so goofy because the big selling point about him, in my opinion, as far as like the character design goes, is that he just has this weird like caveman beat up skull to him. It's very much a like, I am a dummy and I was not like fully formed in the womb. Like, he's just very like,
Whoa,
you know,
whoa.
I mean, he's just got like a big lumpy head. like there's clearly something wrong with him. And he's the protagonist. And it's just, he's just such a lovable, like, doofus looking character.
So that lightning storm that you mentioned is Zarok in the background performing some sort of magic.
Okay. Oh yeah. All right. Yeah, but it's just such a crazy thing. And like you said, there were about 1 billion demos for this game. So I definitely remember playing it as a demo. I never beat it. Mainly because, and I've discussed this before, but the PlayStation 1 era was just such like a wild west for game development. And it was just such a wonderful time because you had all these little studios that were creating like weird concepts and creating really fun games, and you had all these like insane imports coming in from Japan. And so there's just such a just such a glut of wonderful content for us to screw around with. And I think that's part of the reason why this game did not get as much playtime as it probably should have when I was a child. But I definitely remember like running around and taking my arm off and like whipping it at people and like clubbing skeletons over the head. And one of the things that I really like about this game is the what's the word I'm looking for here? It's the dedication to the theme. Like every one of these levels is completely different as far as like the spooky theme goes, and every single one of them is like a different horrible scenario. You have your standard graveyard, and there's like the haunted castle, and there's a creepy like corn maze for us to hang out in. And I just think it's wonderful that they went through so many variations of like kind of
Halloween
your
tropes,
yeah, like
autumn.
Halloween
Yeah.
tropes, like your worst nightmares and like autumn scenery. Like they really did just such a wonderful job as far as that goes.
And to paint a picture, like for me at least, it kind of gave me that Nightmare Before Christmas kind of vibe,
Yeah, a
where
little bit, yeah.
everything was slightly exaggerated and slightly off shape. The houses were just a little bit, like the buildings were a little bit askew, and the enemies were all just as equally as cartoony and kind of fun, creepy as you were. Yeah, the game sets such a great atmosphere, and it is so perfect for Halloween.
Yeah, I think this was a very good choice. I, I like I said, I played this quite a bit as a kid. It wasn't really in my regular rotation, but it did see a lot of time when it originally came out, and I think I probably got about halfway through if I had to make a guess. But it was something different, really. It's like it's an adventure game, but I remember just kind of like sitting on the couch and playing through it, and like there's just so much to explore, and there's so many little like side areas, and it's funny too. Like a lot of your interaction is just kind of leaning into the fact that it's very much a parody of like the whole like spooky feeling. And I
Oh
just
god,
remember it being a lot of fun.
one of my first memories is as soon as you load up the game and you're in Dan's crypt, and the narrator says the best place to find a dead Dan, and just that line right out of the gate just like sets the tone for the entire game, and it's funny. It is genuinely funny.
Yeah, and I remember, like I said, you could take your arm off, and that's always fun to do. And you get your sword, and there's so many other weapons that you can pick up along the way. Like there's clubs and warhammers, and a lot of them have durability.
Yeah.
So it's this kind of interesting concept of like you're just kind of grabbing whatever you can to use and beat up people with. And I always thought that was really cool too.
And this is something I was going to talk about later, but because we're kind of touching on it now, the each level provides you a way to complete everything, including a renewal of those weapons that do have durability. But if you complete the chalice requirement for each level, you can obtain weapons that don't have that. Like the Warhammer, like you mentioned, performs just like the club,
Yeah, and you
except that it
usually
won't
get
break.
those from like your Hall of Hero buddies.
Mm-hmm. Hey,
And
can
you
I
have,
ask you guys a question? Speaking of the weapons, and I'm kind of cutting ahead. The weapon that you get from the carnival area.
so when you get it from the carnival area,
You by
you,
getting tokens, by getting all the tokens.
oh, I don't think I know. I did play through Resurrection, but I don't know what you're talking about.
I will have to Google that.
Yeah, why don't you Google that, Corey? Was there anything else you had?
No, I mean, like I said, it was just such a kind of a wonderful um just change of pace, because a lot of the games you were playing in this time frame, especially if we were talking about like AAA and stuff, or the generic like muscle headed Rambo kind of style heroes, or your like Link or something like that. And here is just this kind of deranged skeleton man that was just kind of doing his own thing, and it was really fun.
Well, there were so many good games coming out at this time period, which we played quite a few of them. This was kind of around the same time frame that Ocarina of Time was out, which definitely was some major competition. Chris, while you're still looking stuff up, I'm just going to go ahead and usurp your spot and tell my
Yeah,
memories.
no, go for it. Yeah.
So I've mentioned several times that when it came to the PlayStation, I had an uncle that owned one because I didn't have one for quite some time. And we played this game together, kind of in between playing Final Fantasy VII because that came out the year prior, but it took us
Another
forever.
amazing title.
Absolutely, yes, just an absolute milestone of a game. And Chris already mentioned it, but the world reminded me of a very Tim Burton-esque style, which Nightmare Before Christmas is one of my favorite films of all time, and absolutely something I've been watching in the lead up to Halloween. But back to my point, I love the stylized world and how unique each level was. You mentioned, the graveyard and the haunted town. You also have an asylum and the pirate ship. All these places that like just
I
kind
love
of
the pumpkin fields. Oh my gosh.
yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's other weird things too. I mean, at one point, you go into an anthill, it's just it's every kind of creepy situation you could think of.
That's something really unique to this game because I've never played anything like that before this. And as speaking of unique, I love the game story because it takes the hero trope and just completely throws it on its head because you find out right away that Dan is not a hero. He's just
He's a
some random
doofus.
guy. Yeah. He's just some dude that was, oh yeah, I've got this, and just running headstrong into the enemy to get taken out immediately.
And even on the in the PSP, the Resurrection, I don't know about the original, but one of the big things about this is that he's having to build up his courage the entire time. Even in death, he is still afraid of doing all this stuff.
That's definitely similar to the original game because Dan is kind of unsure of himself and he has everybody putting him down.
You go to the Hall of Heroes and they're all making fun of you.
Yeah,
and
they're
the
all
narrator making fun of you the entire time.
Hero of Gallowmere. But the game itself, the controls were not great. And it's not even really the controls, but the camera that was such a major pain. But my love for the game really carried me past that, and I was able to turn a blind eye to it. And the game itself, I'm not much of a video game completionist, so I want to hear what you did in your replay, Chris. But for me, if it happens along the way, great, whatever. But a game really has to be exceptional for me to take the time to really pick and poke and collect everything in it. And I found that the chalices were a great way to add replayability to this game. And for those of you out there, to earn a chalice in each level, you have to defeat a certain number of enemies to fill up your chalice to a 100% number.
It's like you're collecting souls or something.
Yeah. And after you earn your chalice, you then go to the Hall of Heroes and they give you money or weapons or health vials, something to help you out on your adventure. And that's how I really measure this game's completion. And I was so captured by this game's story that I wanted to restore Sir Dan's honor. I wanted him to have a place in the Hall of Heroes. But I never really felt the game was all that difficult, especially when I realized that I could return to some of the more challenging sections with more health and better weapons. So
that was one of the other things. Sorry to cut you off, but that was one of the other things I really enjoyed about this is that there was this kind of open world level select, almost like Super Mario World, where you could just kind of
go reminded me of Donkey Kong,
redo stuff that you wanted to do.
Yeah, those are both great points because as you're moving forward, so is the game. So it doesn't feel like you're getting any better until you go back and replay some of those earlier sections to realize how far you've come. That said, I do remember struggling with some of the platforming sections aboard the pirate ship, especially. While it was improved later on, the camera plus controls on the original PlayStation were enough to make this section pretty difficult through no fault of your own.
Yeah.
That's kind of a shame. But I love this game. It's something that I have cherished for years. I really enjoyed the sequel too. My uncle and I played the hell out of that. I don't think it was as good as the original, but I loved it. So, Chris, what are your thoughts on this game? You had mentioned that you didn't own a PlayStation yourself, but you played this game with your brother or cousin?
Yeah, my brother, when I was early high school, he got a PlayStation and he had demo discs and all that good stuff. And as you mentioned, this was on every demo disc. And I'm not even sure where the demo disc came from. He just got a stack of them from his friends. And
Dude, you got demo discs just by like going opening the mail sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, just everywhere.
By the way, I miss that. That's something that I
The
really
demo discs?
enjoyed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was just it was a active way to learn about new content. Like a lot of the stuff nowadays, like if you're not really looking into what's coming out, I don't think you really hear about it. So back in the day, you got a demo disc and you go, well, let me try this, let me try this, let me try this. And I mean, now, especially since we're really not watching TV anymore, like advertisement is really just one of those things where it's like if it doesn't pop up when you launch Steam or something, I really don't hear about it.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
So, Chris, keep going about your memories.
Oh yeah. Anyway, so yeah, my only memories were just of playing the little short demo and even at the time just remembering how kind of Nightmare Before Christmassy it was. Never played the full game, and yeah, that's really the extent of my memories. That's it. I remember playing the demo in high school and thinking, oh, cool, Night Before Christmas game. Like I do remember the box art. Like I said when Cory was talking, I remember like seeing the box art and like, oh wow, you look like this big kind of cartoonishly like big shoulders, big, holding a big weapon, skeleton in armor, looking awesome. And then the game itself was so much. I don't even remember it being that goofy, to be honest. I mean, I remember playing the demo, and back in PlayStation 1 days, like there weren't a whole lot of like hardcore action games that I really remember playing. So yeah,
No,
that's about
nothing
it.
like this.
Yeah.
Well, guys, do you have anything else before we kind of talk about replaying the game today?
I really enjoy this like kind of nostalgic feel, and I will mention that the controls are just as garbage as they're being made out to be. Like,
So I was gonna ask. Well, I suppose I can ask when during the replay. Never mind.
Well, that works. So let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to discuss replaying this game today in 2023. Welcome back, everybody. So I'm going to be discussing replaying MediEvil. So if you out there want to replay it yourself, there are several options, assuming that you have something in the PlayStation family. You can obviously get the original game if you have a PlayStation 1 or a PlayStation 2 or maybe a backwards compatible PlayStation 3, but you probably don't. And instead, you're going to go with a more modern system. So the PlayStation 4 has the remake that came out in 2019, and that is available on the PlayStation 5. You can also play the PSP remake that came out in 2005 because that is also available on the PlayStation 5. I played this game 3 different times. I played the 2019 remake, then I played the 1998 version, then I played the PSP version. And that was the last one I did, and I didn't enjoy it nearly as much because it looks so different compared to how I remember it to be. But as far as playing through the game, I mainly focused on the 2019 remake. And the game looks amazing. The graphics are gorgeous. The gameplay itself is not too different than what it was before, but they did clean up a little bit of problems that were involved with the camera. And like I mentioned before, I love the story. Dan is not a hero, but you have to live up to the legend that you have become, that your name has become, and you have to save the day. And I think that's such a great storytelling device because MediEvil is really a story of redemption. He charged into the front lines and died within moments and had this legacy built around him that he didn't earn. So you, as the player, have to earn that legacy for him. It's so unique. If Zarok hadn't chosen to reanimate the dead in another attempt to control Galamir, you, as Sir Dan, would have remained dead and never became the hero that everyone thinks you are. I really, really enjoy this game. I took the time to get the platinum trophy for this. I beat all of the optional side quests. I got all the chalices, and I loved returning to the Hall of Heroes every time and getting a little bit of kind of background about how they felt about him, because some of them really liked Sir Dan, and there was even a love interest. If you remember the African warrior, she's a what's a better term for a female warrior?
Amazonian?
Yeah, maybe something along those lines. And she's obviously got a very big crush on Sir Dan, and it's just like, I love it. I love this game. There's so much in it that is just great. And I have so few negative things to say about it. And even my negative things are really just kind of nitpicks. And my biggest nitpick is in the game, when you complete a level, there's this kind of green mist or fog that story-wise tells you that Zarok has been here, that he passed through, and that's remnants of his magic or his evil. And in the original game, some of it didn't make sense, because why would Zarok be on that floating pirate ship? It didn't make sense in the original game, but in the Resurrection version of the game, you actually see a cutscene where Zarok is talking to the ghostly captain of that ship. So they kind of went back and fixed that continuity error then. But like I said, Resurrection is not as good of a game as I remember liking it, because I did have Resurrection 2. My ex-wife bought me a PSP in, oh my gosh, what was that? It was like 2007, I think. So a couple years after it came out.
Yeah, back when they were still fairly new.
Yeah, so the game came out on the PSP in March of 2005, but I didn't get a PSP myself until 2007. Oh no, the PSP came out in March 2005. The game came out in September 2005. So that same year, but I didn't get it for a couple more years. But I really enjoyed it then, but replaying it now, that is not the way. If you have a PS5, play the remake. That's how you should play it.
So are the controls way better on the PS5?
Way better.
Because on the PSP, I didn't find the controls that bad, to be honest. I don't remember how the controls were on the PlayStation, and obviously I didn't replay it. But on the PSP, the controls were, so the platforming, the jumping was difficult on spots, and trying to have your camera rotate so you could actually see where the gap was, how big the gap was, how far you needed to jump, and stuff like that. But as far as like moving around and fighting all that stuff, I didn't find the controls that bad.
Did you play this on an actual PSP?
Yeah, actual PSP.
Okay, well, why don't you jump in and tell your replay, and then we'll cap it off with Cory.
Oh, sure. I mean, I didn't take notes on any specific levels, but I mean, this game was, like we kind of mentioned earlier, I kind of summed up all my thoughts earlier. But yeah, I mean, it's perfect for Halloween. I love all the level designs. The controls weren't as bad as what you guys were making them sound like on the original PlayStation version. One thing I did notice on the PSP, and I don't know if it's because my PSP is getting old or not, the motion, like it does not age well. And again, that's because I'm playing on a PSP, on an actual PSP. So it's got the original PSP's processing power and stuff like that. So everything kind of had like this little blur to it.
That motion blur is still present in the PSP remake for PS5.
Really? So is the PSP remake like an actual, like a remake or a remaster? I mean, it's got to be a complete remake, right?
It is a ground up remake, and it was made by someone other than the original guys, Chris Sorrell and Jason Wilson, because they were working on other projects. They had a little bit of input in the game, but not very much. So, like, you kind of mentioned the Jiminy Cricket kind of character.
Yeah.
So he's not present at all in the original game.
Oh, he's not?
Yeah, I had no
Because
idea
he's
what
such.
you're talking about.
Oh, okay. So
He's
fill everybody
so
in,
annoying. Yeah.
yeah, he is your version of Navi. Hey, listen. Like he lives inside your skull. He has a little hammock set up between a couple of your bones, and he is constantly there to remind you to keep moving. You know, like anytime you have an idle animation, he's like, "Hey, get your ass moving. You know, we don't have all day."
Oh,
And
it's so obnoxious.
yes, yeah. And he's also like, anytime you get low on health, he lets you know. But he's also, as part of the story goes, he is your conscience that's talking you into doing stuff. He doesn't want you to wuss out again.
So, for a little bit of more information, in the original game, there's a cutscene. So, after you complete one of the fortresses, you are catapulted out of it. And you land, and there's like this giant creature. I think they call it a Jabberwocky that immediately starts like chasing after you. And then a giant bird swoops down and grabs you and carries you to the pirate ship. So during that cutscene, there's a little worm inside your eye, where your eye used to be, I should say, in the eye socket. That worm in the original game was going to kind of provide that same role and was going to be a narrator for the game, but they cut it. But they decided to add it back in the Resurrection version on PSP, but they changed it instead of a worm to a little like
Cricket roach thing?
yeah, like a
Yeah.
little gremlin looking creature with an obnoxious accent, and he's just so annoying. It really
The
kind of
worm would have
drags
been
down the game.
the worm would have been so much cooler and fitting.
The game basically follows most of the same story beats. Was there any like level that you really enjoyed that really stuck out in your mind?
As dorky as it sounds, my favorite level was actually the Scarecrow Fields, I think, or like with the tall hay, and you don't know.
Yeah, it's a
and,
cool. Yeah,
yeah.
the
I mean,
farmhouse type of.
yeah. I just, to me, like, we just went to the pumpkin patch a couple weeks ago, and Central Illinois like has, these very gentle rolling hills, and I don't know, it was aesthetically pleasing to me. And wasn't super dark, because as we mentioned off air, some of the levels were super dark where I could barely tell what I was doing. Like, I think it was like one of the dungeons or the asylum or something like that. I was like super dark, and
Yeah.
like, I had to like stop moving because of the motion blur. I'd have to stop moving just so I could look to see what I'm actually looking at. And I thought my PSP screen was dying out. It is so dark. And then when you go to the Hall of Heroes, it is super bright. So like,
So in Resurrection, the Hall of Heroes is set in like this cloud, like Mount Olympus kind of thing. In
very
fact,
much Hercules.
yes, it reminds me of Hercules from the Disney
The Disney
film.
cartoon, yeah.
But in the other games, it's more of like a manor, I should say. So
Really?
yes, it's this enclosed building where it's more like a manor or a mansion, but very similar style where you have stairs leading to statues of these other heroes that will grant you weapons or items.
So, anyways, but what was I talking about?
Just how
Oh,
dark
yeah.
the game was, and
Yeah,
you were
and
talking about the Scarecrow level as well.
yeah, my favorite level being the Scarecrow. The overworld map kind of remind me of Donkey Kong.
Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah, the Donkey
Yeah,
Kong,
yeah.
the Super Nintendo map, the overworld map.
Yep.
Where you can kind of go around, you can revisit your previous things, and it was
It's
just
one
a
of the
really,
nicest features, I think.
yeah, I think so too. It's just a really fun playthrough. It was a nice light game. You know me, like I've mentioned before, how I don't. My favorite games are the quick and easy ones. Anything that takes 40 hours to beat is not my typical go-to style of game. So this was right up my alley. It was perfect for Halloween. So perfect. It's also, like you said, kind of Nightmare Before Christmassy, and it's just such a beautiful, fun game too. Like I never got bored of it. You know? Did you
Resurrection
guys?
Resurrection really, really leans into the Nightmare Before Christmas look to it. And to me, it kind of feels like that game was made by someone that hadn't played the original since it came out. So 7 years later,
Oh, really?
and they went with how they kind of remembered the game to me, but not how it actually was, and kind of made it for a younger audience and not the people that actually grew up playing the original game.
Oh, wow. See, and one weird thing about the well, when it came out, what year did Resurrection come out? Did you say
2000,
90,
2005.
2005? 2005? That's a 2005 game?
Yeah.
That does not look like a 2005 game. But I mean, then again, it's PSP, so it's basically a PlayStation 1 game.
And it was one of the first PSP games because it came out that same year.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So North American release date is March 24 for the PSP. The Resurrection came out in September 13th of the same year. So it was definitely in development much earlier than September. So it was probably one of the first games being developed for that system.
Cool. Well, and then, I mean, then I got to kind of change my tune on that one for being one of the first on the system. It's actually, maybe it did actually kind of hold it pretty well because I love the graphics of it. I love the models. I love the environments are. One thing we didn't mention is that, I mean, we kind of mentioned it, but nothing repeats. Like you can go back and revisit areas, but there are no, like, there's not a cluster of houses that you see get repeated in another part of town.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
really took their time with the set dressing.
Yeah.
I think they really did put a lot of effort into how everything looks, and I really love the content that they put in here, from, like you said, the pumpkin patches to there's a
Mhm.
portion where you're with the Grim Reaper, like with the river Styx and everything. It's just they really did just go all out with the like level.
Tell us about your thoughts, Cory.
Is this the modern playthrough? Yeah. Okay, so I mean, I still really love it. I think it's just a fun, campy game, and it's really enjoyable to play. And I definitely would have gotten my money's worth out of it in a modern day setting. It is very janky. I played the original, and the controls are very much uh kind of a boxing match at times. They're a little hard to deal with. Not only that, but the original game is massively glitchy. I normally, when we take too
Yeah.
long to play
Yeah.
something, I'll go back and watch a speed run just so I can, remind myself of everything that's going on. I
Oh my
I
gosh,
popped on a
yeah.
speed run of this, and the world record speed run is like 20 minutes, not because the game is short, but because you can literally like fall under the level almost every stage and just speed run the level that way by bypassing like bosses and everything. So
See, and I didn't
it's
watch a speedrun of the original, but I did watch a speedrun of the PSP version, and it's still the same in that. Like
yeah, it's just
the world
it's
record is like 30
very
minutes, and they're like
it's very
glitching through
glitchy.
walls and gates and stuff, and just completely
Yeah, I
bypassing
mean,
keys and.
even in my regular play, I had issues where I would like end up clipping through stuff, where I would, run into something I probably shouldn't have been at yet because I was just kind of bypassing things on accident. That being said, it is still very fun. It's playable. It is a very campy type of game, and it's very silly, and it's still very much enjoyable. I really like it, but I had issues with that, and then I had a lot of a lot of problems with trying to figure out what to do. Sometimes I'm very much a spastic ADHD type of person, and sometimes trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing was a bit of a trial because it's not like anything is really clearly labeled. You're just kind of running around picking up power ups and then talking to people. So I would have that issue every once in a while as well.
I had that same issue, especially if I set it down, like if I finished a level, set it down, and then next time I picked up, or if I was like dozing off while I was playing it, and then picked it back up, I'd have no idea what I was doing because there's nothing pointing you in a direction, and the world map itself, since you can revisit any area, I'd be like, wait, it's like
you kind of start going into place and go, oh, I've been here already. Crap.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
stuff like that. Yeah.
But I think
the world
that's
map.
a really. Go ahead. I was going to say so.
I was gonna say the one thing that would have been a nice addition is that the world map showed you like a percentage complete of each level or something like that, so that way you actually knew if you've been there or not. Because there's one place like after the village, I think you have like you can go like 4 different ways right away, or
I
like
think so.
maybe after the carnival.
I think that's something that Nintendo does very well. Case in point would be Super Mario World 64, where you can look to see how many stars you've collected on a level when you're about to go back in there. So you don't have to go, oh, have I finished this yet? Let me go poke around for 10 minutes to make sure.
Well, you can see if you collected the chalice or not, but you may not have been able to do so the first time around, depending on just how experienced you are. Because some of the levels you cannot beat without having gone through other stages. So the pumpkin boss, you need to have the witch's talisman, and I don't remember where you get that, but there are some levels that you will have to backtrack if you don't know the quote unquote correct route through the game.
But yeah, overall, I still really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to play through, and it did inspire those like nostalgic, campy feelings that the game originally gave me. So I really had a good time with it. Still, it's just that I think there's things that get overlooked as a child. Like the handling, especially in this era where there were a lot of small companies and third party devs and stuff, and nothing really ran as well as it could have if you're like a AAA studio. So I think a lot of that would get overlooked in my kind of childhood mind. Some of it is very glaring nowadays, so and I think I did run into that a few times with this.
Well, like I mentioned before, this was an independent studio that was bought by Sony, and this was their first like 3D action adventure game. So there was a lot of learning going on for these guys.
Yeah, and I mean they did a great job. Nothing to not to say that they didn't do like a wonderful time, but it does feel like 2 guys worked on it. You know what I mean? like I still really love it, and I think it's a great title. But you can definitely tell like this didn't have probably the Q&A or the help that a larger studio would have.
That's true, and it did have a very small staff, which I mean, games at that time were just kind of like that. They didn't have these 1,000 member that you see on like Assassin's Creed today.
It had 6. Sean, have you talked about your playthrough?
Yeah, I did. I just kind of talked about like how I felt about it. I didn't really talk about anything specific, but there's just, it's hard for me to really nail down anything specific about this game because I love all of it, and its entirety is what really kind of puts the game together, because there's no like single part of the game that is amazing. It's kind of just this amazing experience that you have starting at the beginning and going all the way through. That's another. Did either of you beat the game this time around?
I didn't get it all the way to the end.
I got most of the way.
Disappointed in both of you. I beat this damn game 3 times.
3
guys.
times. Yeah. Uphill in the snow, both ways.
No, I got I think to the last. I probably should just go finish it because I think I'm actually close to being done.
I got all the chalices for each and every single playthrough that I
I will
did.
say
Oh,
that I
you
did
were-
get the chalices for like the portions that I was on though, so that's probably why I didn't finish it because I was actually
so
trying to complete it this time.
Yeah, you were asking about the completionist part of me, and this was like the first game where I was like, I saw the tokens for the weapon, by the way, in the carnival is Woden's. Oh man, I already lost it. Woden's brand, which supposedly is the best weapon in the game, best melee weapon in the game.
Everyone knows that the best weapon is the chicken leg.
So
But,
talk about the chicken leg.
It's a chicken leg. You get to beat people up with a chicken leg that you get from an anthill for some reason.
So in the game, you can help out one of the witches, and she asks you to collect amber. So you have to be shrunk down and enter an anthill. And in the anthill, you are rescuing fairies. And they're not like your typical fairies. These are like little babies that
Ugly.
have, like kind of
Yeah.
malformed, and they've all got these. So Dan, it's so good to see you. Thanks for saving us. No,
Hey,
They-
let me get my pack of Pall Malls and one.
Yeah. Yeah, they sound like they've been smoking Virginia Slims for 30 years, and they help you through, and collecting all of them is how you collect the chalice for that stage. But you collect, I think, 7 or 8 pieces of amber,
7.
and when you return to the witch, she gives you a chicken leg, and that chicken leg, you can throw it at enemies, and it will turn them into food.
Yeah, they get turned into roast chickens, and then you can pick it up to eat them.
Yeah, that you can eat for health. And in fact, that's one of the trophies, is that you have to throw so many of those chicken legs, requiring you to go through the anthill at least twice. Now you know, people out there, if you want to go trophy hunting. Guys, I think we talked about a lot of our replay. Do you want to do another music break? And before we go, I want to talk about the music, because the music is great, and especially in the PS4 version, it is so good. And I think that's the music I'm going to use for this podcast. I hope I have that out, because it's so good. The remaster of it, and the same guys that made it originally, the original soundtrack, came back to do the 2019 release.
Oh, that's cool. I do love, as with everything, this game, it's very thematic, and the music fits in so well with the
So
entire
yeah,
feel of the game.
The guys originally, they wanted to do that orchestra kind of sound, but I mean, because of space limitations, even on a CD, which the PlayStation was one of the first systems that had that CD option, so more space, even that wasn't really feasible for them, and budgetary reasons. Like, this small studio could not afford a full orchestra, but the remake does have a full orchestra to
Nice.
recreate all those songs. It's so beautiful. It's so good.
I will listen to that at work tomorrow. Like, I'll pull up a playlist for that.
It's worth it. So let's take a break, and everyone out there is going to get a chance to hear some of that amazing music. And when we come back, we're going to discuss our final thoughts, and I'm going to announce the winner of the person that's going to get that Zelda Game & Watch console. So stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. This is our last segment where we discuss our final thoughts. But before I do that, last time when we played A Link to the Past, we did not play A Link to the Past. We played The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. I have A Link to the Past on the mind. I did a giveaway for the Zelda Game & Watch console. And I had you guys email in as to what we could do for the episode, how to improve it, and what Zelda games are your favorite. And the winner is Jacob Daniels from Arizona. So congratulations, Jacob. I'm going to get that mailed out to you. And hopefully I'll do that pretty soon. And expect some magnets and some stickers as well with the game. So our final thoughts. Cory, I'd mentioned this to you. Of all the games that had been on the PlayStation Classic, MediEvil should have been one of them. Instead, we got Battle Arena Toshinden, which is like one of the earliest PlayStation games. So I understand why that's on there. But if Sir Dan was good enough for PlayStation All-Stars, he should have made the cut for PlayStation Classic.
Oh, no, I totally agree. Sorry to interrupt, but like in the 90s, he was kind of one of those faces for PlayStation since they didn't really have a designated. They didn't have a Mario or a Sonic. They didn't have a franchise face. He was definitely one of them.
And he was everywhere. Like I said, he was on 11 different demo discs. So he was all over the place. But if you're going to play the game today, and if you own a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5, that's the way to play it. That remake proved that you can still do a 1-to-1 and it can be great. Not every game needs to be updated with new mechanics or needs to add in tutorials every step of the way. Other Ocean did an amazing job of bringing this game from 1998 to the modern day and making it feel just like it did, but even better. And it feels to me like the guys that created the game, Chris Sorrell and Jason Wilson, it felt like they had a chance to create the game that was in their minds, their vision in 1998, but they were limited by the hardware. And playing this game, because I haven't played it since 2019 when I bought it for PlayStation 4, revisiting that first level after so many years, it was like I was back in my uncle's house, sitting cross-legged in front of the big CRT in the living room and playing PlayStation games with him. And I just had this wave of nostalgia while doing it, and I absolutely loved it. And if you can't do that and you have to play Resurrection, it's not terrible. It's just not as good as the original game is. That's what I got. Cory, what are your thoughts on your final thoughts? Is this something you're going to play or should play?
I mean, I don't know if I'm going to go out of my way to play it again. I probably will play one of the re-released versions because I did play the 1999 original when we went to go ahead and play this. But I think it is still definitely a classic, and it is worthy of its platinum status. And I think that if you're a fan of the PlayStation franchise, you should know who Sir Dan is, and I think you should go ahead and play it. I would just recommend playing like a remaster of the re-release. Like I don't think there's any benefit to playing the original game, other than just the nostalgia factor. It just play the one with the cleaned up graphics and like less glitches, because it's still the same characters, it's still the same like fun adventure, and it's still just a wonderful experience. And I think that thematically they did really well, and musically they did wonderfully, and I think this was just a great title all around, and it really deserves like all the praise you can give to it.
Well said. Chris, what are your thoughts?
I really enjoy this. I will, if you ask me to replay it, I probably will. It might be a fun one to revisit at October next year, because it checks off every warm childhood Halloween feeling that you had about every old Halloween movie or anything like that. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you for the great suggestion.
Well, I think it was Cory who suggested it, because it's just one of those games that you can not play for years and you can come back to it and it still captures all of that feeling from the first time. It's such a great game, and I'm definitely going to be playing this on a yearly basis. I've said that with several other games. So hopefully I can live up to that promise to myself.
I wish I could play the PlayStation version. The new PS5, PS4 version.
Well, even if you can't, because you don't own a PS5, I know you own an Xbox, but go ahead and look at some of the videos for it. Even if you just do a side-by-side comparison of that first level, and just the audio and the visual is it's just insane. That graveyard looks so good.
I mean, getting a full orchestra really does justice to the title, because it really does deserve that sort of, like, that's the feel of it, is just this very, like, medieval, crazy,
cinematic,
big cinematic game, and there's a lot of character interaction and like kind of cut scenes and everything else in it. So I am really happy that they went through and did that.
It's absolutely worth checking out, even if you have no way of playing it. Just watching something on it will maybe push you into buying the PlayStation and buying into the PlayStation family. So guys, I think that's all that we have. I think that's it. It was a great game, and I'm looking forward to the next one. And our next game is going to be Mega Man X for the Super Nintendo. The next 2 months, it's the holidays. It's going to be insane, so we probably won't be fitting in 2 games per month. So we're just going to be focusing on one at a time. So next is Mega Man X. Chris, Cory, thank you so much for taking the time. Oh,
thank
you got something?
Well, I was going to say thank you, and I want the listeners at home to know that Sean shut down my idea of playing the original South Park on the 64 game. So just so you guys all know at home.
Look. Maybe for you out there, you're like, oh man, you guys could have talked about South Park. I'm sorry if that's your favorite game.
It's terrible.
But the game sucks. Okay? Throwing snowballs at turkeys. And poorly, like, it was not fun. It's not a good game. They eventually made good South Park games, but that was not the era.
We could have had Sean going on a tirade, guys.
Oh, no, it's not going to happen. We're going to have to play through Mega Man X, and there's some really interesting secrets about that game, and I can't wait to talk to you all about them. Thank you, everyone out there, for listening. Until next time, we've been Superannuated Starman.
Happy Halloween.